there are many times I ran from myself and I used alcohol to do that as well. Just anything to not be here where I am and to not feel what I'm feeling. And I wasn't necessarily given the tools when I was growing up. Like, how do I contain my emotions? No one taught me that. How do I contain all these big feelings I'm having? I learned how to contain other people's emotions, but not my own. And so I think learning to sit with our emotions, like learning to sit with my pain and not run and feeling, because there's a strange dichotomy, even though I did a lot of things that were courageous outwardly. I think the most courageous act is just sitting with yourself and facing what needs to be faced and feeling what needs to be felt.
Pia, you are very welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
I'm so honored to be here, Paul.
It's an absolute pleasure. I had the great fortune this summer to sit on the beach and read Welcome to the Creative Club before it was even published. And that was a great honor. And at the time you were looking for feedback from me. And I found the feedback difficult because when you're reading the work of someone you consider a very close friend, what do you say to them? Like, if you send me your book and it's terrible, and I know based on the nature of our friendship, the answer is then you have to say it's terrible because that our friendship doesn't tolerate anything else.
True.
But I kept messing you going. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's the first thing I want to say. I absolutely loved reading it. And where I would really love to start is, where did you get to a point that writing this was the thing you felt you absolutely had to do?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'll start with this. I think every human has a book in them waiting to be written. And then it just takes the commitment, the massive commitment to actually write the damn thing. But when did I decide? There were a series of signals that were coming my way. For example, I worked with a coach who said that she had a vision of a book in my future. And at first I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's nice. I didn't take it too seriously. I mean, I had a vision of a book in my future too. I just didn't know when that future would arrive. And then one day from Twitter, or now X, someone reached out. His name is Eric, who is the head of a hybrid publisher called Manuscripts. He's a very talented author, and he's also a wonderful salesman. And he
sold you on the idea that writing a book would be a good idea.
He did. He got in touch and he said, have you ever thought of writing a book? And no one has asked me that directly before. And I'm like, yeah, I have thought about it. I would imagine most people he writes say yes. The question is, are they ready to embark on the journey?
That's the thing.
Yeah. And then he said, well, let's have a call and talk. I said, I don't know what I would write about, though. I don't have a book idea. I don't have a draft. But yeah, let's talk. And so we had a call. He was really good. It was like 30 minutes in trying to get at the heart of what the book could be or what was interesting me. And he was really good at hearing me and summarizing and sharing kind of pithy, compelling statements that, could be the organizing principle of the book. And he got me hooked. I was like, okay. And he said something that was really interesting before the call ended, because most people are on the fence. It's a significant investment, financial, emotional, time, many things, but also financial for this particular juncture. And then I said, well, look, I'm going to think about it. And he said, let me tell you, I don't remember what the number was, but 90-something% of people that say no to not write the book when presented with the opportunity will never write the book. If not now, when? Basically. And he had me at that. It was good. It was true. It's like, if not now, when? Why not write the book now? And so that just lit a fire underneath me. And I remember getting really nervous and thinking, oh my God, what am I going to write about? What is this going to be like? Who's going to even read this book? The millions of thoughts that come into one's mind when you're about to embark on a crazy adventure. But then I said, fuck it. One life. Let's do this. This is something that has deep meaning for me. So let's jump. Took me a minute, not that long, but then I just jumped into it head first, not knowing what I was getting into.
When you say everyone has a book in them, which I agree, and it scares me a little bit because I've interviewed a number of people who've written books. In fact, I had a guest on Monday, and he's written an excellent book. And again, like yours, it's almost like a life work. And he said he put 5 years. It's 5 years of his life into it. So it's a huge commitment. And so my thinking when you say everyone has a book in them is, my initial response to that was probably, but not everyone has a good book in them.
Well, that's the whole thing that also stopped me from writing, is that I had this idea of this, soul creative genius in a cabin in the woods, puffing on a pipe, writing by himself, usually a man, writing by himself and just Hemingway style, just being able to publish this work of art on his own.
Yeah.
And it's just a myth. It's actually a myth I bust in my book. It's just a story. It's not true. Every work of art, books included, are collaborative. You work with teams of people to bring this to life. Editors, structural editors, developmental editors, proofreaders. I mean, the list is long, luckily. Just like when you watch a movie and you see the credits roll and you see how many people it took to bring this film to life. I mean, it's pretty incredible, yet we seem to forget that. We seem to think like it rests solely on the shoulders of one person. And that was really a lovely rediscovery, because I worked as a creative director in agencies for, well over a decade, most of my career. And I know that. I know that through the work. There's an art director, there's a copywriter, there's a developer. There are different creatives that come together to solve commercial challenges. It's true in every industry and every creative endeavor. Even artists painters who might work alone are inspired and informed by the world around them and people around them. So we're all standing on the shoulders of giants out the gate, Yeah,
it's interesting. I was in a call this morning, and I was about maybe 30 or 40 of us on this call with a guy called Cameron Harold. Very good conversation about creating a vision in your life. He calls it a vivid vision. And because I now get to speak to people occasionally, and yesterday I was making a presentation to a guy, and I've become more comfortable in admitting that, pretty much everything I've learned from someone else, and going, well, I studied under all these great people. So that's it. I picked up all this and I put it through the mix of my life, and this is what it is. And he said something to the effect, he said, well, this started for me in 1979 one day, and I was sitting in a meeting and we had this, I attended, and a presentation was done on vision. And for those of us that were in the room, for some of us, it changed our lives. And I just thought, isn't it that great? He's not standing up and going, I'm the master of vision. He's going, this changed my life because someone taught it to me. And now my life purpose, it worked so well for me, has become sharing that. And that is the collaborative nature of everything, that we can claim almost nothing as our own.
True.
Except maybe our experience.
Absolutely. But that exception, except, our experience, is what creates a unique piece of work. The way that you see the world, the way that the message is filtered and interpreted and expressed by you is your unique sauce. It's your unique medicine that you offer. And some people are going to be very drawn to that way of expressing a universal truth, for example. And I think that's a gift we all have to offer. And that's why I'm really wild about vulnerable stories about people. So I feel the person or the creative, the person in it, that always draws me to work, whatever, tons of different types of work. It draws me even to post on social media. It's when I feel the person alive in it, that it's coming from that lived experience place. I'm going to use this word that's overused, but that kind of authentic space that feels like there's a piece of vulnerability, there's a portal into someone else's way of being and seeing the world. And I think that's fascinating. And that's unique.
I realized, recently, as I've been looking at my process for bringing guests on the show, and one thing is that I will never invite someone on the show unless I've heard them speak. Most people, obviously we know each other very well, but most people I have not spoken to before. They turn up on the show, but I have heard them speak on a number of occasions, which means I've heard them on a podcast, I've heard them on YouTube, whatever it is. If I haven't heard them speak, I'm not interested in speaking to them, because when I hear someone speak on whatever topic it is, I get a connection, I get an insight into the passion they have. And sometimes it literally only takes me 2 minutes to go, I want to talk to this person. But it's like the knowledge they have is the also, wouldn't that be interesting? But the reason I want to talk to them is because they've got a great story to tell. And then and because of that great story, they've got this wisdom, and it's fascinating and it's engaging. But for me, only because it's emerged from the story. And if they walk in with just the wisdom, well, so I have to hear that. So, and for someone, maybe it's just the way I work, but I have to hear someone speak this. And when I hear them speak, then I know there's a connection. I don't need to worry about what I'm going to talk to this person about, because there's an aliveness there. And once I tap into that, we're going to have a great conversation.
I would argue that that's pretty universal, and that is a wonderful way of approaching any creative work or any work that you put into the world, is remembering that it's your energy, it's the energy you bring, the life that you bring, the experience you bring, that makes it really something that will connect with people. And that's what people are yearning for, if you ask me. This kind of raw openness or vulnerability or aliveness that makes people connect to one another, draws people to one another, rather than, and it's difficult because we live in a kind of world where we want to present a certain way. Often we want people to perceive us in a certain way. So we try to be pronounce well, sit up straight, be the expert, be knowledgeable. And it kind of creates this barrier when we're trying to be someone, instead of kind of just relaxing into who we are and allowing that to come through. And I think that also comes with age, at least for me. There's a beauty in that, like a relaxing into self. And again, I think those are really interesting people to be seated next to at a dinner party. I don't want to be seated next to someone who knows everything and has it all figured out.
No.
That's not interesting
at all. They don't exist.
Well, they might pretend to.
Yeah.
And that's why it's not interesting, because it's a pretension.
You're sitting with a fraud.
Exactly. So it's not interesting. Someone's trying to control how I might perceive them or what they look like. And, I get it, no judgment, but it's just not interesting. I'd rather sit next to someone who doesn't know. I don't know. I'm still exploring. I'm curious. I'm open. A beginner's mind, just kind of just showing up openly.
Authenticity almost always connects. I
Definitely.
Think.
And I think that's deeply connected to vulnerability. Authenticity being vulnerable, right?
It is. And I know you've experienced this in writing the book, because obviously you're opening up to yourself. And to some degree, I've experienced it doing this podcast, because I have very open, frank conversations. And I think when you step into that vulnerability, it's a little bit scary. And two things in my experience happen. Mostly when you step into that place, you develop an amazing connection with people. That's what mostly happens. And it's a great experience. But you will also be rejected.
Definitely.
By people who go, I don't want to talk to you. And I am becoming, I was going to say I've become very comfortable with that. I'll rephrase that. I am becoming a whole lot more comfortable with that. It's mattering to me a whole lot less. This is who I am. But it's there, and I suppose that's what people are afraid about. I remember, my experience, if we go back to the book for a minute, my experience of the book was sitting on the beach, because when I'm in Spain, I get up in the morning, go out on my bike, and then if you a couple of chapters you sent me, and I would take it on the iPad. So I'm sitting on the beach looking over the ocean. So it's a great center. It's a great center. I would flick off my iPad and I would read this while the sea is rolling in. So it was a really nice background to your book. I hope everyone can read it that way. But what was interesting was that when I was then communicating with you, I knew that you had some concern about the openness and the vulnerability, because it wasn't in paperback. It wasn't an order. It wasn't available for people to yet. So only a few people had read it, and I knew that you were concerned about this vulnerability and exposing yourself to some degree. And I was reading it and thinking and reading these beautiful stories. And because I felt I already knew you very well, I was going, I'm getting to know you so much better. So even as someone who knows you well, these stories I felt were connecting me so much more to you. So I love that. And I was reading the book and I was thinking, what's the book P is writing? Is this a creative book or is this a self-help book? Because it's a book built around encouraging creativity, but it's telling your journey to creativity. And that journey to creativity is tender, I suppose. But that's interesting. That's what connected me. What you seemed to be most fearful of was what connected me mostly to the book.
Yeah, well, two things on that. One was, I was really nervous. My husband read the book and there were things he didn't know. He was like, oh, I didn't know that. And we're talking, that's my husband. So I was really, look, I wanted to write a book that felt true and a book that was an anti-how-to. I just wanted to show how I did it, how I rediscovered my creativity, how I lost and found my creative power. And losing your creative power, well, those you get scuffed up and bruised doing that. Those are not always the prettiest of stories. They could feel really quite vulnerable, but that's how I show the transformation. That's how I show I went from A to maybe Z, right? I had to discover who I wasn't to be able to see who I am or who I was. And those are not easy stories to tell, but they're really important ones. And what helped was really trying to think what stories serve the purpose of this book and the reader, right? Like what experiences really drive the message that I'm trying to share home. And that was a really good filter to have that my editor helped me a lot with. So it wasn't just a difficult story for the sake of it. It was all in service of the reader in some way. But I was really nervous. I was very nervous, and I had to coach myself and give myself several pep talks before it went out. I think at some point, it didn't last long, but I had the thought like, shit, am I really going to put this into the world? Maybe I should just not. And then I was like, come on, that's not going to happen. You didn't come this far to not come this far, And then a funny thing happened. When the book did finally launch into the world, something started to shift where I felt like my book, I almost felt like it was deserved, and all different parts of me that I didn't always want to see or integrate or bring into the fold, because there were parts that I might have felt shame around, or, it's like, didn't want to look at. And the healing process, which was unintended of writing about them and looking at them and then sharing them, was truly transformative in ways that I never could have expected nor experienced before. Not in this kind of visceral way. So anyway, when the book went out, I just felt, oh, she deserves for me to stand for her.
Yeah.
This is a story I'm going to stand for. I'm going to stand behind. I'm going to promote. I really want to share and get into the world, because I wrote the book to make an impact in one person's life. Like, make an impact, and I wasn't going to not do that because of my fear of being judged, rejected, whatever. And once I was able to tolerate my own emotions about those parts of myself, then of course I could tolerate other people's. Other people are going to have their own experiences. Either way.
That's for sure.
Whether they resonate with it or whether they don't, those are their experiences. And if I can honor my experience and my emotions of seeing all these different parts of myself, the good and the bad, the bruises and the beauty marks, the shit and the sunshine, and I can tolerate my emotions around that, then I'm free.
Yeah.
And that realization only really sunk in through the act of doing it. We can know it in theory, but then when you actually then go through the process of having to experience it, it becomes lived in my body, and it continues to, because I get feedback. So far, I've been really blessed because it's been sort of in a closer network of wonderful, wonderful feedback. But I'm also preparing myself for the day that someone says, this is shit. And that's cool. Sure, I might have a moment. That's human. But then it's like, let them have that experience. That's all right. That's okay.
If you're not willing to have that moment of rejection, I'm talking about your book, but I'm talking about everything in life, and I'm talking about everyone who's listening. If you're not willing to have that moment of rejection, then you don't get to experience all those moments where people go, P, your book touched me, your work touched me, I learned, I changed. So for that, I'm going to say 10%. I don't know what it is, but that's my experience. It is a very small amount of people that will not like it, or everyone doesn't have to love it, but most people won't strike out. But if you can't stand up for that, the price you pay is you get to miss all the other stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, the same for love. That's what it reminds me of as I hear you talk about it. If you don't
Yes.
open for love because you're afraid of getting hurt, then you're robbing yourself of so much joy. You're
Yeah.
robbing yourself of the experience of love, of being loved
Yeah.
and of loving. And there's so many ways that we can do that in life without realizing it, trying to protect ourselves when what we're really doing are kind of stealing from ourselves. We're not allowing ourselves to experience something wonderful and also, yeah, sure, maybe a bit painful. That's okay. That's what I mean about learning to tolerate. Like, I can be with the pain as well. And I think that's the most important work we can do to liberate ourselves, to experience the full buffet life has on offer.
It reminds me of reading John Kabat-Zinn's book, Full Catastrophe Living. When I trained as a mindfulness instructor, that was kind of core curriculum. But he was very much emphasizing the need for people to experience all of life, the full catastrophe of living, because there's so much chaos in life, but just to experience the beauty of it all. Was there anything that surprised you? Like, I'm wondering, was there a story that emerged on paper you're going, I forgot about that, or you didn't realize the impact? You didn't realize how powerful it was that you go, well, I have to put this down on paper.
There were a lot of stories that hit me in the solar plexus as I was writing them, because it was a chance to rewrite my story and own my story in a very different way from the eyes of the conscious human I am today.
Yeah.
So, and look at my maybe less conscious self, versions of myself, and look at them with more tenderness and compassion, and also maybe more of an accurate filter, I hope, rather than the one I might have used prior. And the chapter or the story that I guess kind of surprised me the most was the one about my divorce. Because it was only through my editor editing it and seeing like, I don't hear the voice of the author that I've heard throughout all the other chapters. This is strange.
You were holding back a little bit.
I was judging myself.
I was judging yourself.
I was not like the way my philosophy, for me, just to segue, like creativity is a way of being in the world, not just
a way of living every moment.
It's right. It's a way of living. It's a way of being. It's a way of seeing. It's not just an artistic talent. So that's the premise of the book, and backed by neuroscience research and a lot of other research. So, the way I was seeing it was not congruent with the way that I saw everything else. The way I was looking at my divorce felt like it was an old perspective and not a very compassionate perspective, blaming myself. I said, "Ooh, this voice, this seems really, this doesn't sound like the author that I'm reading from. This is something that's different.
Someone else is writing
this chapter, and it sounds like another version of you is writing this chapter."
Okay. Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, God," I had to reread it again, and man, she was right. It didn't just take one reread. It took a while for it to sink in and to see that I was still looking at my divorce through older me's eyes, and a me that was still kind of caught in shame or feeling blame for what had happened. And I needed partnership to show me a different viewpoint, a different vantage point, she invited me into different seeing glasses, different lens. And then I was able to see it more clearly, and I was able to heal more than I ever have through that new sight and the opportunity to rewrite it as who I am today. And that was really surprising. And it was hard as nails. Let me tell you, that was not an easy chapter to write it on. It's the only memoir chapter in the entire book. I mean, there's memoir throughout the book, but it's mixed with other elements of research and field work and poems and lots of other things. But this was just the pure memoir chapter because it felt like a really important one.
It seems like maybe the book wouldn't have been complete if you had excluded it.
Yes, and you know what? I wanted to exclude it. I really did. I remember my editor saying, "You mention the divorce, but you don't really talk about it." And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, but
Because I don't want to.
exactly,
Yeah.
isn't that enough? And she's like, no, if you're mentioning it, the reader is going to wonder, okay, what happened? What is this?
Mm.
And that avoidance was also something that I needed to look at. And it's really powerful. I think narrative and writing has such personal transformation potential, whether you're a writer or an author or not. Just being able to reflect on our lives, the highs and the lows, things we went through, and just write about it, could be journaling, is a really powerful practice.
During one of the most stressful times in my life, decades ago, I was recommended The Artist's Way. Is it Julia Cameron?
I sent
think
it to you.
You did. But it's a wonderful book, and it got me into the habit of just that craziness of just putting thoughts on paper without structure, without any. And I find it just a wonderful tool. And about a week ago, something came across my desk that triggered me. Just something happens where something someone says. I think it was an email that triggered me, and I felt myself drifting into this, whatever was anger or whatever ever rising. The beauty was that I saw it, so I didn't jump straight into feeling. I kind of thought, well, this is arising. So I said, I know what I need to do right away. And I came over to my desk here and I opened up my writing pad and I start writing it out. And what happened was, within about minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so, I had just moved through it. And that wouldn't have happened to me maybe years ago. There are things I would have had to put pen to paper for hour after hour. But for whatever reason, it's to take any challenge you're facing and put it down on paper. Journaling, free writing, whatever you want to call it. It's something you have to, it seems so simple, but it's something you have to experience to realize just how healing and powerful it is.
Absolutely. It's a cultivation of self-awareness, much like meditation. Just sitting down, pausing, reflecting and noticing what's here. What is this feeling? And allowing yourself to write it with no filter, no judgment. Like, really, what is this feeling? What's here? Just be for your eyes only, and just to name it and to release it, sit with it, and then look at it. It's like you are creating your own self-awareness practice through that. Kind of like a mindfulness, being very mindful where you are right now in your body and your feelings, what's going on. So I think it's a really powerful tool. I journal in the mornings, on most mornings, just to do that, to meet myself, just to get a chance to meet myself before the day takes off like a galloping horse. And I can just say, what's here? What's happening in my mind? How am I feeling? What's going on? And just seeing what emerges. I don't have a plan. I don't have 5 questions. I just see what emerges. And I find that a really grounding practice, a way to meet myself.
It concerns me sometimes that it may not be an accurate assessment, but I wonder if most people will go through life and never actually meet themselves.
Whoa.
They'll have lived a version of it, but they'll never actually meet themselves.
What a missed opportunity. Because people are fascinating. They get a chance to discover who they are in different ways. I mean, we change all the time. We're fluid.
The book takes you lots of stories in your life, and we see you as a young girl, I can't remember, 6, 8, 10 or whatever, up to a kind of a stroppy teenager, I hope.
I don't mind.
Up to a wild young lady, to a mature woman, the whole thing. And as I was reading through it, the authenticity certainly comes across hugely, but and maybe I said this to you at the time, but the courage that came through was enormous, because in each of these challenges you faced, which is not saying they weren't big challenges, but each of those challenges, you had the courage, I'm not sure what word you'd use, the gumption or whatever, just to go, okay. You know what I mean? I'm coming out the other side of that. And when I say that people won't meet themselves, I think it's because of a lack of courage. And that's not a judgment. I say that because when I lived my life in a way that I wasn't meeting myself and being honest with myself, if I now go, why? The answer is fear. So that courage is what fuels everything.
Yeah. And I didn't meet myself. There are many times I ran from myself and I used alcohol to do that as well. Just anything to not be here where I am and just to not feel what I'm feeling. And I wasn't necessarily given the tools when I was growing up. Like, how do I contain my emotions? No one taught me that. How do I contain all these big feelings I'm having? I learned how to contain other people's emotions, but not my own. And so I think learning to sit with our emotions, like learning to sit with my pain and not run and feeling, because there's a strange dichotomy, even though I did a lot of things that were courageous outwardly, I think the most courageous act is just sitting with yourself and facing what needs to be faced and feeling what needs to be felt, so Vipassana helped me a lot with that. I did a 10-day silent meditation. It's not a retreat. It's like living like a monk for 10 days. And feeling the pain in my body was a much easier gateway to teaching myself that I could sit with my pain. It was kind of like the first step, knowing that I could, because you meditate all day for hours. And then there's 3 points during the day where you have to have is it called a strong determination? So you sit for 1 hour without moving. Oh man, I remember the last 15 minutes, my whole body was on fire. My mind was going nuts. Like, what are you doing? Did you sign up for the meditation of pain? Is this like you're going to break your knee as a result? Like all types of thoughts. It was crazy. I was just wanting to escape the feeling so badly of just physical pain, And nothing ever happened. My knees were fine. Yeah, it was really painful, but I was creating suffering. My mind was creating more suffering than the physical pain by these series of thoughts that would catastrophize the whole thing and make me scared. So kind of going through that process of just sitting with my pain was really, really powerful. And I feel in many ways it helps set the groundwork to just sit with my emotional pain as well, to show myself that I'm not going to get lost in this abyss. I can be with my pain and sit with it and look at it. And it's amazing what happens when you face things. They shrink. It's the anticipation of what it will be like, which is always so much worse than the actual event or the actual doing of it. So anyway, that's just it's also in the book, that experience. So it is relevant, but I think it's a hard thing to do. And, we need to be around in the right environments and in the right place in our life, and hopefully have people who can support us in that.
And yet our instinct is to pull away from pain.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a good idea to pull away from physical pain, but emotional pain, it's our instinct to withdraw from that emotional pain. But I think the freedom is in moving through it.
Absolutely.
Moving through it in a way that's mindful of ourselves and caring of ourselves and exploring what might be on the other side.
I think we live in a society that's pain averse on many levels. We're not taught. We're taught that pain is something to avoid, to get over, to stop, to immediately fix or heal, when there's value in pain. Pain teaches us things. It shows us things we need to look at, things that need attention, things that need healing. And through the wound, if you will, is our freedoms on the other side of it.
As you were speaking and I'm listening to you, and I can hear the gardener outside blowing around, and I just thought to myself, that's life. These things many things are inconsequential. It's a little bit of background noise. I mean, really, who cares? But we can get caught into these things. But when you were talking about the pain, what I was going to say is that the world is geared up now to distract ourselves from that pain. And so food, TV, alcohol, drugs, it's everywhere. And I don't know, it just seems to be that that's what the world wants, and that's what that's what you should do. A culture of, let's go out for a drink. And I'm not averse to going out for a drink, but in a culture where you're not dealing with what you need to deal with in your life, and you're ignoring it, and you're drowning it, and you're suppressing it. And we know where that leaves. I may have told you a story before about in the 2008 or 9 in the recession, when my business fell by 60%, and it was just a terrible time to be in. It was very, 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 very stressful. A lot of business financial woes like everyone else had. But what I did was I really leveraged into everything I knew about well-being. So I would exercise, I would meditate, I would do yoga, I would journal, it would literally, I'm going to say overdose, wrong choice of words, but I was literally leveraging everything I knew to work against the negativity that I felt was present in my life. And slowly I began to emerge from it, slowly. But a friend of mine was in a similar situation, and his answer was a bottle of whiskey every evening. And now that I look back 20 years later, my business recovered, my life recovered. I'm blessed to have a very good life. He's dead. Yeah, he lost so we both had business difficulties, but he wasn't present to those business difficulties. I mean, it was a bottle of whiskey, so he wasn't present. So I've no doubt he was capable of solving those problems, but you can't solve those problems with a bottle of whiskey in you. And so he just sunk deeper and deeper and deeper, and his family were left to try and solve the problems, and they lost the business, and they lost their house, and I'm sure shame and everything. And a couple of years ago, he just died. He would have been similar age, if not younger, to me. So to me, it's a stark example of the consequence, because I felt we both stood in the same place, and we made different choices. Now, interestingly, around the time, there were a lot of people that criticized the behavior. I knew it was a road I could have chosen. No, I couldn't have ever chosen it, but I knew it was a possibility.
Sure.
For that anyone. So I never judged him because he was in a difficult situation, but the consequences of not simply facing those emotions, of facing the difficult situation you're in, and just then going, okay, I'm in the ship, but now I have to deal with it. Because when you do that, you eventually emerge from it. And when you don't, it just destroys you.
Well, what comes up for me as well is, tools. Not everyone, yes, everyone is responsible for their own experience in life. Yes. But some of us aren't really given or in search of the tools that really help. You mentioned some super helpful tools that help me almost every day. Recession. These are I know that they're practices that support me, that sustain me, that ground me, because life is, talking about pain or healing or any of it, it's not like a destination or a one and done. It just comes with the territory. It's going to be there. It's going to come. It's going to go. It's going to be there. So how can we strengthen ourselves or become more resilient? It's through having practices that help support us, like meditation, like exercise. I mean, everyone has whatever works. You could dance in the kitchen, and that could be a support. Like whatever works for you, but at least trying to find what are things that sustain me, that feed me, that energize me, that give me what I need, that are not destructive. And oftentimes those tools are not the easiest path. It can be easier to, at the time, in the moment, just to knock off with a bottle of whiskey. And instead of really motivating yourself and saying, I'm going to, go to the gym or do these things. Now I'm just going to go fade away and just entertain myself and enjoy. No judgment. But it's also difficult things to do.
It's a very fair point you make, because I'm making the assumption that everyone has those tools ready to use, and the answer is they don't. And if that was 20 years ago, I'd begun meditation 20 years before that. So I had a 20-year daily practice of meditation. I looked after my well-being. I did yoga. I journaled. I was already in the practice of doing all of these things. What I needed to do was up my game and go, look, you, these are now going to save your life. You really, really need to dig them. But not everyone has those tools. And I think the problem then is, if your default when you meet small life challenges is how you handle those small life challenges will become how you have those
Definitely.
major life challenges. And that's the training. That's the training. And I love that. I know you like the work of Michael Singer as well, but he talks about the greatest spiritual practice is showing up to life and accepting it as it is in front of you. And it sounds simple until you try and do it. But I think that what I'm saying about his point is he will say, you're at the traffic lights and they're red. You pissed because you're a little bit late. I think the point is, if we get, these are opportunities for us to go, our instinct is to go, yeah, and I missed the green light. And if you have a moment of awareness, you can go, let it go, let it be. Maybe I'm meant to sit here. And when you practice it in those small things that are easy, I feel for me, you're building the muscle that when something more
100%.
difficult comes on, when it's going to be really hard to hold yourself together, but you've begun to build that muscle.
100%, because it's so much easier to slip when things are rocking your world and it's just feeling next level, difficulty. It's so easy to not. It's really easy to slip into old patterns of whatever that might look like. For me, it's getting very busy and throwing everything I have into it. I still practice that. I can feel it come up very often, especially, it's not necessarily all bad, but when I feel like I have a lot going on and I really am passionate and want to do great, I throw myself at it. And it takes conscious effort to say, no, I can be successful and do all the things and go at it with more ease and enjoy my life and sit and have a matcha tea. I don't have to book my schedule from the morning I wake up to the moment the day is over in order to get it all done. It's an old mechanism. So for me, it's also developing new patterns and new habits. And we have a neural pathway that we've been digging into, right, for so many years. It takes consistent practice and effort to create new ones and not just slide down that road that we so beautifully paved for so many years. And I think it takes, it's a practice. So I'm just putting it out there that I'm practicing every day. I think there's still just stop, enjoy, trust, relax, know when to put that energy to use, because it's actually really useful. I have a drive. It can be so useful as long as I'm driving it. It's not driving me. That's the difference. And it's subtle. So what I'm saying in relationship to this is that is another practice that is building a new pattern, a new pathway that is going to probably for me be a lifelong one. It might get a little easier, or maybe the overdrive comes up and then I can recognize it more quickly, or maybe it just becomes a thought. But it's going to be, it's a part of what helped me at some point. It helped me survive at some point. It was very, very useful. There's a reason it's here, but it's no longer useful in that way, if not directed. So I just wanted to bring that in because it feels a bit more like there's a gray area. There are things happening under the surface that are sometimes a bit more challenging that just looking at face value. Like, yes, accepting life as it is a great practice, but also recognizing the coping strategies and mechanisms that we have developed along the way, which used to once be useful, that have outrun their usefulness, and learning how to practice moving differently because it brings us joy, or we don't have to move like that. It is a daily practice. It's a lifelong practice, and it can be a beautiful one. I love stopping and enjoying having a cup of frothy matcha latte. Like, that's my thing. That's like, I'm going to stop. And that's why meditating every morning helps me a lot. Because I'm kind of like, get up, just run into the day. And all these practices make me stop. Nope, not doing that.
Well, meditation is daily practice for me as well. I find it enormously useful.
Me too.
What I have noticed is that when I'm very engaged in something or I'm working on something, I can work on it obsessively. And there's two things there. I almost always have a choice in that. I don't work for someone else. So I don't have to work if I don't want to work. So, but when I dig into something, I can get very much buzzed by that. But what I've noticed is that buzz can be just as uncomfortable and stressful as the negative buzz to want to use something different. And my body communicates that to me. And I have to be careful. I have to be careful of that as well. I have to be careful that I don't drift into that. we seem to have gone so many places in this conversation. What's the creative encouragement you have for anyone listening?
Well, I define creativity as having the capacity to respond creatively to whatever challenges life serves you. So you have a creative response to whatever is served to you in life. And that's your creativity at play. You get to choose how you want to respond. You get to choose how you want to be. And everything that getting closer to your own authenticity and meeting yourself, getting close to what moves you, what triggers you, what makes your heart beat faster, what you're longing for, what fuels you, what drains you. That is your unique creative expression in the world. That is your creativity at play. You are a creative being. Everything that you do, the way you walk down a grocery aisle, the way that you drive your car, the way you strut into a room, the way that you give a pitch, the way that you compose an email, this is all your creativity at play. And the closer we come to who we are, not who we think we should be, or following someone else's idea of who we should be, the closer we get to that unique creative expression that's inimitable and that just draws people in as well. It's about also that, what we spoke about, the vulnerability. So creative inspiration, take the time to meet yourself. Yeah. Take the time to ask some powerful questions.
It seems like what you're saying is that you don't have to be a writer, an artist, a musician, that creativity is simply just an approach to life where you're meeting life as it is and expressing it with your full being as you are and just riffing with life to some degree. But that the creative expression is just creating every moment of your life, or of the willingness to experience every moment of your life and respond to it.
That is the ultimate creative act, designing your one experience of life. I can't think of a more creative act out there. You get to be the creative director of your life. You get to choose how you want to experience life, how you want to design your experience, but you have to become aware of the scripts and beliefs that are running. What story is fueling me? There's not enough. I'm not enough. What stories are behind some of the decisions I make and some of the behaviors I have? Just checking in. Are they mine? Did I inherit them? Did I write them myself? Are they useful? Are they harmful? Do I want to continue following that script? If no, what story would I rather write about myself in life? And then what behaviors actually bring that to life? That's massively creative. I think that is so creative. Wow. So that's my invitation, and it could start in very small ways. It's just getting curious about yourself.
So the creative calling is to write our new story.
That's right. Make sure you're in the driver's seat. You're in the creative director's chair. We're going to run on some scripts. It's kind of part of who we are as humans. We run on narratives. It's the glue that binds us together. We're meaning making machines. It's what we do for a living. So just make sure that the meaning you're making is something that's yours, that works for you, and that you're conscious of. Because we got this one precious and wild life, right? Might as well live it. And whatever that looks like for you, to you, and for you, there's only one way to find out, and that's to ask, what do I really want? Those big questions, what's a meaningful life?
It sounds like it's time to write our own stories. Pia, my final question is, where can people find this wonderful book? Where can they find it? Where can they find you? I know you might just talk a little about this before we wrap up. I know you also work as a creative consultant and creative coach. So maybe just tell us a little bit about that, and then where people can find you.
Sure. I work as a creative partner with visionary rebels and unconventional dreamers and inspired misfits to help them bring their visions and ventures into the world to create impact. People who are looking to do things their own way, and that's often a bit different from the way the conventional way of doing things. We find our own song, our own tune to dance to. So working with entrepreneurs, working with companies and brands that are mission-led and at a crossroads where they're looking for creative partnership to create their brand strategy or story. Or I also could be, you're at a point in life when you're ready to create something brand spanking new and you need partnership to help see the contours of what that is and what it could be, and then a partner to help bring it to life. So that's sort of
Sounds wonderful.
the
And where
short
can they find you?
version. Collective Studio. Collective, written with 2 Ks, Danish style. It could be in the show notes, .studio. And the book is available, Welcome to the Creative Club, is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Indigo. It's all on my website. And bookshop.org, which is actually a great platform that supports independent bookstores as well.
Pia, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been an absolute joy. I had a feeling we would go in all different directions, and that just makes for good conversation. I appreciate you. It's been wonderful.
It's been a pleasure.